Talia Owens knew she didn't belong here the second the valet opened the door to a Rolls-Royce she didn't own. "Ma'am?" the man asked, holding the door wide like she was some kind of heiress instead of a friend of a friend's plus one. "Right," she muttered, clutching her tiny black clutch to her chest and stepping out, her thrifted black dress hugging her a little too tight around the waist. The dress code said formal. It didn't say anything about not borrowing your outfit from your roommate's cousin. The private estate glowed like a palace, all stone columns, glass chandeliers, and a fountain big enough to swim in. Talia followed the stream of polished guests into the mansion, pretending she wasn't already regretting this. She wasn't supposed to talk to anyone. She wasn't even technically on the guest list. Her friend Ava had begged her to come after her actual date bailed last minute, and Talia figured free champagne and some people watching wouldn't hurt. But this was not people watching. This was a millionaire's auction. The kind where the guests didn't bid on art. They bid on people. Charity, Ava had told her. It's harmless. All the dates are prearranged, and the money goes to children's hospitals and clean water projects. It's more of a spectacle than anything. Like a zoo, but for people, Talia had said. And yet here she was, sipping something with bubbles out of a crystal flute and trying not to stare at the women being paraded across the stage like prizes. Everyone looked like they belonged in a magazine. Tall, sleek, polished. Talia folded her arms and leaned against the farthest wall she could find. That was when she saw him. He was standing across the room, near the stage, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a glass of scotch. His suit was black, fitted, and probably cost more than her college loans. His hair was dark, swept back with ease, and his jawline looked like it had been carved by someone with something to prove. But it wasn't his looks that stopped her cold. It was his eyes. They weren't scanning the room like everyone else's. They weren't bored or calculating. They were focused. On her. Talia blinked and looked around. Nope. No one behind her. Just a marble wall and an oversized painting of a horse. His gaze never wavered. She looked down quickly, her heart thudding in her chest. Do not stare. Do not get involved. Just drink the champagne and blend in. Number 22, the auctioneer said. A date with Madison Hale, international model and wildlife activist. The room erupted in raised paddles and quick bids. Talia shrank farther into her corner. Ava reappeared out of nowhere, breathless and flushed from dancing. I swear this place is like a rom-com waiting to happen. You good? I'm fine, Talia said. Just watching. Ava followed her gaze and whistled low. Oh, my God. You know who that is? Talia sipped her drink. That's Maddox West, CEO of West Tech. He's like one of the youngest self-made millionaires in the country. Super private. Never dates anyone from a scene. No scandals. Maddox. Even his name was sharp. Talia glanced back. He was still watching her. Maybe he thinks you're someone important, Ava teased. I'm wearing a dress from a secondhand app and shoes from Target. Exactly. You're mysterious. Before Talia could respond, the lights dimmed again, and the next woman stepped onto the stage. The auctioneer's voice boomed through the speakers. And now, something a little different. Tonight, we have a surprise guest who's agreed very last minute to join our auction lineup. A little spontaneous fun. All for a good cause, of course. Talia frowned. Miss Talia Owens. The glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the marble floor. What? She breathed. A spotlight hit her before she could run. Ava's face turned white. Oh my God, they must have pulled your name from the guest registry. You're down as my +1. Talia took one step back. A security guard blocked her path. You're up, miss, he said with a polite but firm smile. I didn't agree to this, but the crowd was already clapping. The spotlight followed her as she stood frozen. Talia, Ava whispered. Just walk up there and smile. Someone will bid, and you can leave. It'll be over in 5 minutes. Talia's legs moved before her brain could catch up. She stepped onto the stage, blinded by lights, heart pounding in her ears. She didn't hear the opening bid. She didn't process the auctioneer's voice. All she saw was him, Maddox West, standing casually at the edge of the crowd. His gaze locked on her like she was the only person in the room. And then he raised his paddle. $200,000, he said, his deep voice cutting through the noise like a blade. The room went quiet. The auctioneer blinked. "Excuse me? 200,000, Maddox repeated, eyes never leaving hers. A pause. Then chaos. People gasped. Phones came out. The auctioneer stammered something about a record-setting bid. Talia just stood there, stunned. "Sold," the auctioneer finally declared, slamming the gavel down. To bidder number 94. Maddox. Her date. She walked off the stage in a daze, her heels clicking on the floor like gunshots. He was waiting for her near the back, hands still in his pockets, calm as ever. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly, stopping in front of him. "I know," he said, "but I wanted to." She looked up at him, unsure what she was supposed to say to a man who just dropped 200 grand like it was spare change. "Why?" "Because," he said simply, "you were the only person in this room who looked like she didn't want to be bought." Talia stared at him, her throat tightening. "I'm not a prize," she said. "No," he said. "You're not." The silence stretched between them. Then he offered his arm. "Dinner?" he asked. She hesitated, then took it. They walked out together, past the murmurs, the stares, the whispers. And even though she still didn't know what she was doing here, part of her wasn't ready to leave. Talia had never ridden in a Bentley before, and certainly not one with white leather seats and a driver in a matching black suit. She kept her hands folded tightly in her lap, her posture ramrod straight as the city lights flicked past the tinted windows. Maddox hadn't said a word since they left the auction. She snuck a glance at him. His profile was unreadable sharp lines and stillness, like he lived in a world where silence was power. She thought he might have been one of those men who liked the sound of his own voice, the kind who wielded charm like a blade. But so far, he hadn't said anything unnecessary. Not even when she asked, "So, where are we going?" He finally looked at her. His eyes weren't playful. They were careful. "There's a place downtown I own," he said. "It's quiet, private. You'll be comfortable." "You own it?" He nodded once. "I don't like crowds." She resisted the urge to fidget. Her shoes were starting to pinch, and she was suddenly hyper-aware that she'd never taken off the auction paddle number, still clipped to her bag. "Is this what you do?" she asked. "Buy strangers and take them to mysterious places you own?" That got the faintest glint of something behind his eyes, amusement, maybe, or curiosity. But it vanished before she could decide. "No," he said. "I don't do this. Ever. Ever." The driver pulled up beside a sleek black building with no sign. Just a polished steel awning and a doorman who opened the car door like he'd been expecting them all along. Inside, the restaurant was dim, elegant, and empty. Not a single other patron in sight. Dark wood, soft jazz, and an open kitchen where two chefs moved silently behind glass. Talia stopped short. "You rented out an entire restaurant?" "I didn't rent it," Maddox said, already handing his coat to a waiting attendant. "I own it." She turned to him, brows raised. "Do you own everything you walk into?" "Only the things I want to last." A server led them to a table near a large window overlooking the river, where candles flickered in crystal holders. Talia sat slowly, unsure if this was some kind of dream or a test she hadn't studied for. The menu had no prices. She glanced across at Maddox, who was already watching her with a kind of patience that made her feel simultaneously seen and unsteady. "Why me?" she asked, setting the menu down. "You could have bid on anyone. You could have walked out with a model or a movie star. But you picked the girl hiding behind a potted plant.
He didn't answer right away.
Then he said, because you looked like you were trying not to be noticed. And I've learned that the people who hide the most often have the most to say. She blinked at him. That's oddly poetic for a tech mogul. I wasn't always a CEO. The server returned with a bottle of wine so old it had dust on the label, poured carefully, and disappeared like a ghost. Talia took a small sip and leaned back. All right. If I'm here and you've already dropped more on tonight than I make in a year, then I get asked questions. Fair. He nodded once. What did you do before all this? Before the private restaurants and absurd auction bids? I rebuilt broken things, he said. Computers, mostly. Old hardware, outdated software. I liked figuring out how to make something worn out work better than it did before. She tilted her head. So you're a fixer. Sometimes. And now you're rich enough to own places you don't even go to. He considered that. I don't care about owning things. I care about creating things that matter. She swallowed a bite of something buttery and perfect, realizing only then how hungry she was. So, what exactly are you trying to create with this? He didn't flinch. An honest connection. Talia lowered her fork. You think buying someone is the way to do that? I didn't buy you, he said, voice low. I bought one evening of your company. What happens after that is entirely up to you. Her pulse stuttered. He wasn't flirting. He wasn't bluffing. He was just stating a fact. The conversation shifted, slowly, like a tide turning. They talked about things she didn't expect, favorite books, places he'd never been despite having access to them, her part-time job at a community center, how she was still figuring out what she wanted to do with her art degree. He asked questions like he actually cared about the answers. Not just polite curiosity, but a focused kind of listening that made her feel like every word she said mattered. By the time dessert arrived, a delicate tower of dark chocolate and raspberry, Talia had forgotten to be nervous. She watched him as he reached for his espresso, his sleeves rolled up now, revealing a watch that probably cost more than her rent. You ever get tired of it? She asked. All this? The money, the power, the constant control? His expression shifted, subtly. Yes, he said. But I don't have the luxury of walking away. Why not? Because if I stop moving, everything I built starts to collapse. And too many people depend on me for that. She leaned forward, her voice softer now. That's not the same as happiness. No, he agreed. It's not. The check never came. Of course it didn't. The staff simply nodded and disappeared again, the understanding unspoken. Outside, the air was crisp, the river glittering under the city lights. Maddox walked beside her slowly, his coat now over her shoulders, without asking. Where do you live? He asked. Brooklyn, she said. Few blocks from the East River. It's not fancy. Safe. Mostly. I'll have a car take you. She stopped walking. I can take the train. He studied her. You're stubborn. Only when someone tries to carry me like I can't walk. He smiled, but it wasn't condescending. Fair enough. They stood at the edge of the sidewalk, the silence stretching again, not uncomfortable this time, but charged with something she didn't know how to name. You're not what I expected, she said. Neither are you. She hesitated, then added, I don't usually do this. I figured. But I don't regret it. His eyes darkened, not with desire, but with something deeper. Good. A sleek black car pulled up beside them, and a driver stepped out, opening the door. She turned to him. Will I see you again? That's not up to me. She blinked. What do you mean? I made my move, Talia. The next one's yours. And then he stepped back, hands in his pockets, watching as she slid into the car with his coat still wrapped around her shoulders. As the door closed and the car pulled away, she twisted to look back, but he was already gone. The invitation arrived the next morning, not as a text or a call, but as a handwritten note on cream paper, resting atop a silver tray outside Talia's apartment door. She stared at the envelope like it might vanish if she blinked. Inside, the note was brief. The handwriting was confident, slanted, and unmistakably his. Dinner. 8 o'clock. You'll be picked up. Wear something you feel powerful in. No address.
No explanation.
Just that. Talia closed the door slowly, her heart hammering as she clutched the note to her chest. She wasn't sure what stunned her more, that he'd found her address, or that the invitation felt less like a summons and more like a challenge. Wear something you feel powerful in. She stood in front of her closet for nearly an hour, discarding every option she owned. Nothing felt right. Her wardrobe was a mashup of practical pieces and paint-stained jeans, not exactly designed for impressing a man who owned private restaurants. Eventually, she called in a favor. By that evening, thanks to the miracle of a friend's boutique connection, she stepped into the hallway wearing a tailored navy jumpsuit with a plunging neckline that made her stand a little taller. Her hair was swept back, her heels sharp enough to demand attention. She didn't feel like someone pretending anymore. At exactly 8, a sleek black car pulled up. The driver stepped out and opened the door without a word. She slid in, nerves tight, but determined not to let them show. They didn't drive to a restaurant this time. They drove past the city skyline, through a gated entrance, and up a winding hill that overlooked the glittering lights below. The house at the top wasn't a mansion, it was a fortress of glass and stone, modern without being cold, perched like it belonged to the sky itself. The driver opened the door and gestured for her to enter. She stepped through the threshold and froze. The house was quiet.
Warm.
A fire flickered in a sunken living room. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, but what caught her attention wasn't the architecture, it was the man watching her from the stairs. Maddox was dressed in black again, but this time without a tie or a jacket. Just a button-down rolled to his elbows, his frame relaxed but unmistakably deliberate. "You came," he said. "You invited me." He descended the stairs slowly, each movement precise. "I wasn't sure if you would." "I wasn't sure either," she admitted. "But then I realized I didn't want to wonder what I missed." He reached the last step, his gaze sweeping over her just once before settling on her face. "You look like yourself." She raised an eyebrow. "That's supposed to be a compliment?" "It is." He led her through the living room and into a glass-walled kitchen, where a table was already set with flickering candles and 2 plates of something that smelled rich and unfamiliar. "You cooked?" she asked, surprised. He pulled out her chair. "I had help. I figured." They sat, the silence between them no longer awkward, but weighted with something unspoken. She picked up her fork, then paused. "Why here?" "I wanted you to see where I breathe." She tilted her head. "Is that something you struggle with?" "More often than I admit." The food was too good to have been made by anyone who didn't know what they were doing. But she barely noticed the taste. "You said last time that you couldn't walk away from the life you built," she said. "Is this the part you stay in, or the part you escape to?" He set down his glass. "This is the only place I don't have to pretend." "Pretend what?" "That I've got everything under control." She studied him. "You seem like someone who always has a plan." "I have contingencies." "That's not the same thing." The wind shifted outside, brushing against the glass like a whisper. He leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "I didn't ask you here tonight to impress you, Talia." "Then why?" "To know you." "You already spent $200,000 on me. You think that gives you the right to know me?" "No," he said. "But I hoped it earned me the chance." She stared at him, her pulse unsteady. "Then ask," she said. He didn't hesitate. "What are you running from?" She blinked. "That's your first question?" "Yes." She looked down at her plate, then back up. "I'm not running. I'm just not ready to stop moving." "Why not?" Because if I stop, I'll have to decide what to do next. And if I choose wrong, I don't know if I'll recover from it. He sat with that a moment. You don't trust yourself. I don't trust stability, she said. I've never had it long enough to believe it'll last. His eyes didn't waver. Neither have I. The table fell into silence again, but this time it was heavy with understanding. Eventually, he stood and held out a hand. Come with me. She hesitated, then took it. He led her through a hallway lined with abstract art and into a small room filled with books and a single grand piano. The space was dark except for a lamp near the shelves and the glow of the city through the windows. He let go of her hand and moved to the piano, running his fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. My mother played, he said. She taught me before she died. Talia stepped closer. You still play? Sometimes. Not when anyone's listening. Why not? Because I don't like being watched when I'm not in control. She rested her hand on the piano's edge. Then why did you bring me in here? He looked up. Because I want you to know the parts of me no one else sees. Her throat tightened. He pressed a single key, a soft note that echoed in the quiet. I don't want this to be a transaction, Talia. I don't want to be the man who bought your time. I want to be the man who earned your trust. She sat down beside him on the bench, the space between them barely a breath. I don't trust easily, she said. I know. And I don't fall in love because someone makes grand gestures. I'm not asking you to fall in love, he said. I'm asking you to let me try. She turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. You really think this could be something real? He looked at her like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. I know it already is. The words settled between them, raw and terrifying and real. She reached for his hand, not because he asked, but because she wanted to. And when he laced his fingers with hers, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Steady. Without another word, he guided her fingers to the keys and began to play, slow and uncertain at first, then stronger. A melody neither of them expected, but one they were ready to follow. Talia stood at the edge of the rooftop, the wind teasing the loose strands of hair from her braid as the city shimmered below. The glass paneling caught the reflection of the stars, and the scent of jasmine from the rooftop garden lingered in the warm air. She hadn't expected this, any of it. Not the quiet, not the stillness. Not the man who now stood behind her, hands folded patiently, waiting. I've never been this high up without feeling like I was going to fall, she said, her voice steady but soft. Maddox stepped beside her. You're not going to fall. She glanced at him. You say that like it's a promise. It is. They were alone. The rooftop was part of a private gallery space he owned, of course, and after the evening in his home, after the piano, after the way he'd looked at her like he was memorizing every detail of who she was, he'd asked if she'd meet him here. Not with words, but with something quieter. An invitation written in the way he brushed her hand as they left the music room. In the pause before he let her go. He turned to her now, his expression unreadable, but his voice held something unshakable. There's an exhibit opening here in 2 days. Press, collectors, everyone who thinks their opinion matters. But I didn't want you to see it then. I wanted you to see it now. Talia looked around. The rooftop was empty, but for them. Then he gestured toward the glass doors behind them. Inside, the gallery was dim, lit only by spotlights that illuminated a series of canvases along a curved wall. She stepped forward, drawn in. And then she stopped cold. The paintings were hers. Her work. Her strokes. Her palette. The pieces she'd thought were lost from her college showcase after the studio closed unexpectedly the year she graduated. She'd mourned them, convinced they were tossed out or misplaced forever. This can't be real, she whispered. I found them, Maddox said. I tracked down the company that cleaned out the building. They sold off the contents to a collector in Lisbon, who never even unwrapped them. I bought the lot, and had them restored. She turned to him, her eyes wide. You didn't even know me when those were taken.
No, he said.
But I remembered something you said about how you weren't ready to stop moving because you were afraid of choosing wrong. I thought maybe seeing what you've already created might remind you that you don't have to be afraid of what comes next. She walked to the center canvas, her fingers trembling as she reached forward, not quite touching it. It was a piece she'd painted late one night, when she was still living in a walk-up with no heat, using leftover acrylics and pieces of canvas stapled to a wooden board. It was raw, imperfect, and deeply hers. You brought them back, she said, her voice cracking. You never should have lost them. She turned, and the expression on her face made him pause. You don't understand, she said. No one has ever fought for me like that. Not my professors, not my father, not the people I thought would. I'm not them. No, she said. You're not. He took a slow step forward. Do you trust me yet? I'm getting there. Then keep walking. She laughed through a tight breath and shook her head. You're impossible. Only because you make me want to be more than I am. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Instead, she crossed the space between them and laid her palm flat against his chest. His hand covered hers. I don't know what I'm doing anymore, she said. But I know I don't want to stop doing it with you. I can work with that. They stayed in the gallery until the lights dimmed completely. He walked her to the elevator, but instead of taking her home, he asked if she wanted to see something else. She nodded before he even said what. He took her to a quiet stretch of the river, where a long, low building sat nestled beneath trees. Inside, it was a studio floor-to-ceiling windows, paint-streaked floors, and a single easel in the center. This is for you, he said. It's fully funded for 2 years.
No rent. No strings.
Just create. Her lips parted, stunned. I can't accept this. You can, he said. And you should. Unless you're still afraid of choosing wrong. She looked around, taking in the natural light, the tall storage cabinets, the soft light filtering through the skylight. What if I fail? Then you fail forward, he said. But you won't. She turned to him, her arms crossed over her chest, not defensive, but overwhelmed. You keep giving me things I didn't even know I needed. That's because I see you, Talia. All of you. And I want the world to see it too. She stepped toward him, her voice barely above the sound of the water outside. I used to think love was supposed to come slowly, that it had to be earned over years and struggle. And now I think maybe it's about the moment someone shows you you're not invisible anymore. He reached into his pocket, then not quickly, not with dramatics, but with quiet certainty. She froze. He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it. Inside was a ring unlike any she'd imagined for herself. No oversized stone or flashy setting. Just a slim platinum band with a single sapphire, deep blue and striking, like the first bruise of dusk. I know what this looks like, he said. But I'm not asking for a wedding. Not yet. I'm asking for your yes.
To us. To this.
To the life we haven't built yet. She stared at it, her breath caught. He held her gaze. You don't have to answer now. I'll wait. She reached forward, her hand steady now.
No, she said.
His eyes flickered. Her fingers curled around his, closing the box between them. You don't need to wait. My answer is yes. Relief flooded his features, not with fanfare, but with quiet, honest joy. He slid the ring onto her finger, and the moment it settled there, something in her shifted. She wasn't just a guest anymore. She wasn't a placeholder or a +1 or a girl trying to disappear into the edge of a ballroom. She was his. And he was hers. When they kissed, it wasn't rushed or frantic. It was a promise, a seal, a beginning. They stayed by the river until the sun began to rise, casting gold across the water, painting everything in the same light that had once only existed in her dreams. And as the city stirred to life behind them, she leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. "Funny," she whispered. "I thought being seen would feel terrifying. How does it feel now? Like I've finally come home." He kissed her temple, his voice low. "Then let's never leave." The first time Talia unlocked the door to her studio, it was raining softly, the kind of warm spring rain that kissed the pavement rather than pounded it. She stepped inside and exhaled, her breath catching against the stillness. The space didn't feel like something given, it felt like something earned. She'd moved her supplies in gradually over the last week, but tonight was the first time she planned to stay. Canvases leaned against the wall, brushes arranged in jars like bouquets, her work table already scarred with paint and charcoal. It felt like a beginning, not a continuation. Maddox had given her the key, without ceremony, just placed it in her hand and said, "Make something that scares you." She hadn't replied then, but now, standing in the low glow of the pendant lights, she whispered, "All right, let's see what happens." She painted until the sun rose. For the first time in years, she didn't think about whether her work would sell, or who'd see it, or if it was enough. She just created. Unfiltered. Bold. Honest. She didn't even notice the tears until they hit the canvas. By morning, she sent Maddox a single photo, a corner of the piece, not the whole thing and nothing else. She didn't need to explain it. He'd understand. He always did. Later that afternoon, he met her at the gallery where her pieces were being prepped for the opening. She watched him from across the room as he spoke with the curator, his posture relaxed, but his attention laser-focused. He asked questions no one expected the man who funded the space to care about: placement, lighting, the flow of the room. He listened like it mattered. She walked up behind him and slid her hand into his. "You're early," she said. "I figured you would be too. You're starting to learn me." His eyes met hers.
No.
"I'm still discovering you. There's a difference." She smiled and leaned in, her voice low. "I think I like being discovered." That night, they left the gallery hand in hand. There were no cameras, no press, no chaos. Just the two of them walking beneath the city lights. They took the long way, wandering through side streets and quiet parks, and when they reached the edge of the river, they sat on a bench without speaking for a long time. Eventually, she turned to him. "My mother used to tell me that the right kind of love doesn't silence you. It amplifies the parts of you you've been trained to hide." He looked at her, quiet and attentive. "I spent years shrinking myself," she continued, "making my dreams smaller so they wouldn't disappoint me when they didn't happen. Then you came along and made everything feel possible again." "I didn't make it possible," he said. "You did. I just reminded you." She shook her head.
No, Maddox.
"You gave me space to believe again. And that's not nothing." He pulled her close, resting his chin against her hair. "You gave me space too," he said. "I've lived a life of control, of precision and calculated risks. But with you, I've learned how to breathe without needing to measure every second." They didn't need to say more. The quiet between them was full of everything: unspoken trust, gratitude, a love that had grown not from grand declarations, but from moments of truth. 2 days later, the gallery opened. It was a blur of lights, murmurs, and clinking glasses. People moved from piece to piece, stopping to read the placards, their eyes lingering. Talia stood near the back, her hands clasped behind her, trying not to fidget. She wore a soft green dress that caught the light whenever she moved, and for the first time, she didn't feel like she was pretending. She belonged here. A woman approached her, stylish and older, with a voice like velvet. "You're the artist?" Talia nodded. The woman gestured to one of her larger pieces, a storm of color and shadow. "This one. It's like standing inside someone's memory." "That's exactly what it is," Talia said. The woman smiled. "Then you've done something remarkable." Maddox appeared beside her a moment later, his hand resting gently at her lower back. "You're glowing," he whispered. "I'm exhausted. You can be both." She leaned into him. "I think I'm finally proud of myself. I always was." Later that night, guests started to leave, and the bus faded into a gentle hum. Maddox stayed behind to help her close up, and when the last light dimmed, he turned to her. "I have something for you." She tilted her head. "You already gave me everything. Not this." He pulled a small box from his jacket different from the one that held her ring. Inside was a single silver key, simple and unadorned. "What's this?" "A key to my place. No pressure. No expectations. Just if you ever want to be there without me needing to invite you." She stared at it for a long moment, then closed the box gently. "You already gave me the first door. This one I'll open when I'm ready." His smile was soft. "That's all I ever wanted. For you to choose." And she did. Not that night. Not the next. But a week later, she let herself in while he was still at a meeting. She made tea, curled up on his couch with one of his books, and fell asleep with the rain tapping softly against the windows. When he found her there, curled into his space like she'd always belonged, he didn't wake her. He just sat beside her and watched her breathe, his world finally quiet. Months passed, seasons shifted, and with them, so did the shape of their lives. Talia's work sold. Not all of it, and not at once, but enough that she didn't question herself anymore. She began teaching 2 evenings a week at the community center again, not because she had to, but because it grounded her. She wanted other young artists to believe they could take up space too. Maddox stepped away from his company's day-to-day operations. He didn't leave, but he delegated, learned how to trust others with the empire he'd built. He traveled more. He slept better. He laughed. They didn't rush anything. They didn't need to. Their engagement unfolded slowly, quietly, tucked into mornings spent painting beside each other, nights spent reading in bed, and weekends exploring cities neither of them had ever seen. One evening, just before the gallery's second major showing, Talia stood in the center of her studio, staring at a new canvas. She heard the door open behind her. "I was thinking," she said, without turning. "We should leave for a while after the show. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere with terrible Wi-Fi." He stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I was hoping you'd say that. No press. No planning. Just us." He kissed her shoulder. "Anywhere you want. You sure you can survive without 5 meetings a day?" "I'll survive if you're there." She turned in his arms, her eyes searching his. "You ever think about how impossible this all seemed a year ago?" He brushed her hair back. "Sometimes. But now it feels like the only thing that ever made sense." They didn't need a wedding to affirm what they already knew. They had the ring. They had the promise. And they had the life they were building one choice at a time. They left for the coast 2 days later. A quiet house, a stretch of ocean, and nothing on their schedule except sunrises, paint, and the occasional slow dance on the porch. Love, it turned out, didn't need fanfare. It just needed 2 people who saw each other fully and stayed.